What's up, y'all? Welcome to the Sam the Beard Guy channel. So today we're going to talk about just how to play worship piano better, specifically in the CCM kind of contemporary space. And so that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about voice leading and how to play chords correctly, not playing block chords and keeping chords simple versus when to make them more complex, understanding tonal spacing and how to fill in space, tension and release, your relationship with guitars, call and response, playing rhythmically, just little things that I've learned over the years just make things better. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Make sure to like, sub, share, comment, all the things to help grow the channel. That is super helpful. So just a little bit about my background if you're brand new to watching my channel. I've taken a ton of years and years and years of playing jazz and really theory and technique intensive music, and nowadays I find myself in a lot of contemporary worship spaces where I'm playing a lot simpler than maybe my instincts at first would naturally take me. And so I've had to adjust over the years on how to take that really technically intensive musical mindset and just transition it down to what serves the song and what fits the music the best. And so I feel like I've done that really well up to this point, but I also get to kind of add in a little bit of flavor that I consider kind of my own, that's a little unique, that lets me do things that I want to do, but I'm also not distracting from the song or making it worse. And so hopefully this is helpful. I know a lot of people come from different worlds of like, well, I'm a classically trained pianist and I just want to read my sheet music and like play the same thing every time. You have those people, and then you have the other people that are like, I can't read a lick of music and I grew up playing super simple stuff and I don't have all the technique. Both of those are fine. There is a way to find just that middle ground of how to play this type of music and to play it in a way that serves the song, and do it in a way where you get to have some fun. Not all worship music is fun. That just kind of is the way it is. But you can do your best to make things as fun as possible for you, but also serve the song and serve the moments and serve the music, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So let's hop in. All right, so first let's talk about voice leading and playing chords correctly, just some basic building blocks. And so let's take a song that everyone knows, Cornerstone, right? So Cornerstone, Cornerstone, hero in the city. And so what makes that example less than ideal is really for two reasons. One, there's a lot of parallel movement, and so parallel movement can be bad. There's something about things moving together that just bothers the human ear. I don't know if there's actually a scientific reason, but there's just something about parallel movement that just bothers people. People want to hear things that stay consistent. People want to hear some things moving, some things staying the same. People want to hear things move in different intervals and in different shapes. And so parallel movement is bad. And so the other thing that makes that not great is just there's a lot of third of the chord. And so you want to be really careful how much of the third of the chord that you're adding into your voicings. And so the reason why the third kind of gets a little bit of an elevated just awareness is because the third is really the note that is defining in our chords whether it's a certain chord quality or another. So if it's major or it's minor, really that's all we deal with in worship music is major or minor. We don't have really a lot of the sevenths or whatever. And so the third is what's dictating whether something is major or minor. And so because that note carries such a strong weight in how it defines stuff, if you over voice the third, the quality of the chord just really changes. And so if I were to play this differently, instead of doing the block stuff, I were to do something I'd more naturally do. So, Christ alone. So what makes that a lot better is I have some droning qualities. So we'll continue to talk about this concept, but there's something about certain notes in a chord and certain notes in a key kind of consistently being played that defines worship music. This isn't as prevalent in other forms and other genres, but there's something about especially with piano, just notes getting played over and over again, and then using some notes to kind of define the chord characteristics. And so here it's like, I'm playing root and 5 of the chord, and then I can move to A and actually change nothing in my right hand. So I'm getting some chordal movement, I'm getting some tonality shift, but I'm also using something to kind of drone through. And so in a lot of ways you can think of that as voices that, and not voices like vocal voices, but piano voices that tie chords together, like create some continuity. And then on this G chord, a really common thing that people do is adding in that third and getting that little crunch there. It drives a lot of jazz and classical heads crazy, but that is a very defining sound in worship piano, is having that crunch. And so that's something to play around with. If you have a song that's not using any non-diatonic harmony, so no secondary dominants or whatever, you can really make that work over every chord almost. And just walking up, a note to get all the differences. So that's a tool that you can use to make some of your chord voicing sound better. You don't want to use this 100% of the time, because then it's just going to be all you do, and that gets, one, boring for you and boring for people to listen to. Another way that you can, really utilize just your hands, if you have the hand size for it, you can do a lot of roots and thirds in your left hand if you're able to. And so, like getting down to this C, that helps like add a little bit of weight to the going to the root and then kind of walking back up to the 4. If you want to throw your thumb in there, I do that all the time. If you can maybe do that, like do an 11th and get... So that can be helpful, because if you just do... That sounds a lot less interesting than... So if you're able to do that, that's something that you can practice. Obviously, there are some physical limitations. Not everyone has big hands. I have decently, I think, medium-sized hands, but I've also spent, 25 years practicing this shape. I can't do tenths in every key, so even I'm physically limited. Like if I'm in D flat, I can't do a D flat to F. That's really the hardest stretch. I could do D flat to F sharp or G flat, which is funny because it's wider, but it's just the reach from a black key to a white key that makes that tough. So there are physical limitations. But if you're in the key of C, like why not try to get some of those tenths in there? Because if you're doing that with your left hand, then that kind of actually frees up your right hand to just do different things. And so I could take the voicings up a little bit higher and hit some of these chord tones with my left hand. So So the more chord tones you can hit with your left hand, the more it frees up your right hand to do more stuff. So yeah, avoid parallel movement. Avoid really playing the same thing in both hands at any given time. There are nuanced situations where maybe that makes sense to do, but typically, if you have a lot of parallel movement, it just immediately makes you sound like a 5-year-old. And so maybe that sounds harsh, but that's just kind of the way it sounds. It sounds really beginnerish. And so this is just a way to immediately spice up just how you're playing chords. Even if you're just sticking to this 1-5 thing, that's like a slam dunk, you know. So yeah, that's how to play some better chords. So another thing that's inside of playing better chords and not playing block chords and avoiding parallel stuff is voice leading. And so this is like kind of the icing on the cake. But something to think about with specifically the top note of your voicings at any given time is how that's kind of moving through the chords. And so this is not something that's always a big deal. Sometimes you can just kind of like... So you don't always have to be thinking about voice leading, but let me give you a dramatic example where it's like, oh, that's what he's talking about. So you could do so all those notes are in the chord, but they just sound like you threw paint up against a wall and did nothing with it. And so when you're playing chords, think about how that top note, there's a lot of truth to, you know, the top note of your chord voicings are really kind of a small melodic component to a song and what you're playing. So, so that's all it is just something like that. That, you know, might not even ever get noticed, but that's a way to correctly play a chord and not do the dramatic example I did yesterday. Like, oh, I'm just going to play notes that are in the chord, because that sounds just thrown together and not intentional. And so I love to think of voicings as like intentionality. Like, how can I intentionally play this chord in a way that makes sense? And so let's take another song like Oh, praise voice lead here. So even that example right there of just like, I'm playing an E this way and then resolving into B. Because you could just do praise that feels super disjunct. But if you do praise you're getting some really nice voice leading. Because the problem with, doing the extreme example that I did earlier was that's distracting to the ear. And so if that is happening, whether people realize it or not, the ear is like gravitating towards what doesn't feel smooth, what doesn't feel succinct. And so anything you can do to create just continuity and consistency in your voice leading, not playing block chords, because in a lot of ways playing block chords and doing a lot of parallel movement is just bad voice leading. If you just break it down to the most simple way of saying it, like block chords and parallel movement is just bad voice leading. And so be thinking about that top note of your chords, because that can be easily distracting if it's not good. So yeah, voice leading, playing chords correctly, not playing block chords and parallel movement or at all. So yeah, that's that. Let's talk about keeping chords simple versus when to make them complex. And so this is a really subjective thing. I'll give you an extreme example, because extreme examples are a great way of being extreme. And so let's take so that song. Let's play just like crazy. So all Christ be you. Now, some of that kind of works, and there's some parallel movement in there too that just doesn't sound good. But the way I like to think of keeping chords simple versus when to make them complex. Let's take a like a down verse of something. Let's do a hymn of heaven. This is super simple, super chill. And then I would create some contrast on the chorus. So I'm using the idea of simple chords and then more complex chords. It's also this kind of tension and release thing. And so we're going to talk about tension and release here in a little bit. But I'm creating some contrast by keeping stuff simple. And then as we move into a new section, I change it up. Now, you could not do that. You could just, there will be a day when all will bow before him. Let's create that example where we do the complex first and then the simple. So, how I long to be there will be a... So keeping chords simple, when to make them complex, it's a very subjective thing of when to do it. But a lot of the way I make that decision is how can I create some contrast between I did it simple here, let's get a little more complex, or I did a little complex here, how can I make it simple? Like there is a tension and release just element to how you voice your chords and how dense you make them and how open you make them. And so that's something to think about. What I would probably avoid doing, and this is more, I think, transitioning into more objective feedback, is complex chords in parts of songs that are like, just this is the final chorus, you're raging and you're playing like really dense stuff. I would think in the way of, as more instruments get added to what you're playing, the less dense you probably have to be, because there's more stuff getting added, and they're just going to cover you up and start to cover you up even more and more and more. And then all the complex decisions you're making are actually adding to the muddy mess. So if it's like, oh, sorry. It feels cool by yourself, but if the full band is going, what might work better in that moment is, So back to some of that just shell 1 and 5, and then using a finger or two to get some of those other chord tones. That helps glue the band a little bit together. That's not distracting away from other things that are going on. And so that would be the only kind of objective thing I say, of like, hey, if it's a big part of a song, maybe think about how to make it simple. And then maybe at the beginning where it's just you, like, you can do some of the cool stuff and change things up and just add some cool little flavor that maybe you deem as your own or whatever. And so that's a very subjective thing of, man, when do I keep chords simple? When do I make them complex? But that's typically how I think about it is, man, if I'm going to do a verse complex, then I'm going to do a chorus simple, or vice versa. Or maybe it's like more meta of like, I'm going to do verse 1 and chorus 1 complex, and then verse 2 I'll transition to some of the meatier simple stuff. Or I'm doing complex down here and then simple up top, or whatever it is. But be intentional about how you choose to decide when to do that stuff. When I make it simple, when I make it complex, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, hopefully that's helpful on that topic. So let's talk about understanding tonal spacing. And so in the worship world, depending on your environment, but I'll speak to my environment, there's basically 3 areas of the keyboard that you can live in. You can live in bass world, you can live in mid world, or you can live in high world. And so each one of those serve their own purpose, and they have their own role. And so obviously low stuff is like the bass stuff, right? And if you grew up like me, actually, in more of the gospel world, there's that old meme of like tape down here that says don't play here. That's not true in the CCM world. It's often encouraged to play down here. We'll talk about each zone, but the thing with down low is you always have to be thinking about your bass player. Like, if you and your bass player are not playing the same thing down low, then both of y'all are playing wrong notes. It doesn't matter who's actually wrong as far as translation to the congregation or whoever's listening. Y'all are both playing the wrong thing because you're not playing it together. And so there's some gauging that you have to do with what bass player am I playing with, who am I playing with, how does he play. Even the guys that I play with, there's some guys that this is what I'm playing and I'm never going to change it. That's a lot easier to play with as far as down low because I just know what I'm going to get. Where there are other guys who have more liberty to, I felt like doing an inversion there. And I've learned with those people, hey, he might, want to do an inversion there. So it could be like, the typical inversion here is 1/3, right? But there's some guys that I've played with long enough where I kind of know he might play a 1 there or 1/5. And so the way that I would get around that and not be in his way is I'm going to move my voicing up high. That way, if I'm doing that voicing up high and he chooses to go to 1, it's not getting in his way. But if I just barreled on and he's playing the root, that's a big miss. And so part of playing down low is I would say the bass player gets the preference. If you're going to be in their world, you got to make sure you're synced up with them. I don't think a piano player can say, well, you played the wrong thing there. It's like, no, I'm the bass player. Like, this is my world. If you're going to be in it, like, do what I do. And so you have to pick and choose how you play down there, but just make sure you're playing the same thing. So that's the low range. Middle range is all chord stuff, right? So just all the meat and potatoes of music essentially is right here in the middle. It's how you voice your chords. It's how you do all this stuff. Now, just like with down low, you had bass players to worry about. In the middle, your big person that you're working with is your electric guitar player. And so if you guys are both playing shapes and voicings right here in the middle and it's all on top of each other, or you're playing a line that's like, and they're playing, both of y'all are playing the wrong thing. It doesn't matter who's actually right, who's actually wrong. As far as translation goes, y'all are playing the wrong thing because y'all are playing stuff that's sitting on top of each other. And so being mindful of your electric guitar players in this middle range is really important. I've done a lot of training things where I've gotten to actually talk to people, not videos, but like I'm in a room asking people questions and they're asking me people questions. And one thing that I've learned is a lot of people just don't have their electric guitar players turned up loud enough in their mix. And I always tell them electric guitar players need to be loud enough in your mix so you can make decisions based off of what they're playing. They don't have to be the loudest thing, but they have to be audible enough where you can make a decision because they do something. And I can't tell you how many people I talk to that's like, oh, I just have electric off. That's a huge miss. That is objectively an incorrect way to play in a band with other people, is to not have really everyone on. You can make an argument for like vocal 5 is off because they're only singing harmony, and I have acoustic. Depending on who's playing acoustic in my world, it's lower, sometimes it's hotter. But you have to have electric in your mix so you can make decisions. And also like visibly looking at them. In my world, like I'm right next to the guitar player, so I get to see what they're doing. I'm listening and I get to just look over and see where they are on the neck. But your tonal space here, you're competing with electrics, or they're competing with you, however you want to see it. And so that's who you're with down here. Up high is kind of the same thing. So up high is where your sparkly, cute moments are going to be on down sections. And then when there's lead lines, this is where you're going to usually live. So I haven't played that song in a minute, but up high is also where you're going to sync up and play lead lines with electric players. Typically, your lead lines are going to be what they are. So there's not going to be a lot of, adjustments or deferring. Your decisions to defer up high are usually going to be, why don't you take the lead line and I'll do chords? But in some of your more down moments where maybe you're playing up high, like, like if I made that decision on top of the electric also playing that fill or a different fill but kind of the same, that's another example of y'all both just played the wrong thing because you're playing on top of each other. And so understanding where you're at in each section and who you're competing with is super important. This is, all bass. This is electric. I didn't even say this, but this is also vocal world too. And so, if you're playing a note that's one half step off from what the vocal melody is, you're fighting with them, and that can be jarring. Sometimes it works, but sometimes it doesn't. And so electric's here, electric's definitely up here too. And so, in addition to just knowing who you're fighting with, what you also want to be really mindful of is if certain parts of the keyboard in the tonal space are not being occupied by someone. And so the one thing about piano that is cool, but it's also an extra challenge that really no other instrument has to worry about, is you can do so many things. And so, like they say in Spider-Man, like with great power comes great responsibility. It's like you can do so much, but if you don't wield that, privilege well, if that's what you want to call it, you can get in people's way. But you can also leave a lot of things that are void that maybe you should be doing. And so I see this a lot of like, so imagine in that scenario, I'm playing down low, me and the electric are playing the lead line. There's only one electric, and that's it. What's missing is all of this in here, because to be honest, most of the time acoustic players are not going to be loud enough in a mix. They might be audible, but they're not really providing size and meat to chordal structures. They're more of a percussive tonal instrument in a way. Like they get deemed like tambourines a lot of the times, but you can mix them in a way where they're not just tambourines, but they're never going to provide the size that an electric guitar player or piano player can. And so if you guys are like wailing away on a lead line and a bass line and no one's playing chords in the middle, that would be something of just understanding your tonal spacing and understanding what everyone in the band is doing. So that could be a decision where you choose not to play bass notes, Or you just choose not to play the lead line and let the electric player play it, and then you go. So just think about that. I get that feedback often if I'm, in whatever moment of negligence, like I haven't been listening as well as I could. I'll have a front of house guy come up and say, hey, like, can someone play chords there? At least I happen to be around a lot of gifted engineers, and so I do get that kind of feedback. Hopefully you do too. But yeah, tonal spacing. Who am I fighting with in these areas of the keyboard? Can I hear what they're doing? Are they loud enough in my mix where I can make decisions myself based off of what I'm hearing? And then just also understanding that you have more access than anyone else to a lot of different things. And so if a lead guitar player needs to play a lead line, you might have to go, okay, someone needs to play chords, I'll play the chords. And so, yeah, understanding your tonal spacing, understanding how it all fits together, make sure everything is audible. I'm not saying kick drum has to be the loudest thing in your ears, and I'm not saying electric has to be the loudest thing in your ears, but it should be loud enough where you can hear it and make decisions based off of it. And so, yeah, that's tonal spacing. Let's talk about filling space. And then I have in parentheses like tension and release, call and response. And so basically, how do you do fills? How do you play counter melodies? How do you play things around someone singing something? And so the big thing, and I just did a teaching thing last week, and I kind of explained it like this. I think of doing fills. Think of a verse, like. The Lord is my shepherd. So that to me, I'm seeing as a response to the vocal melody being sung. The Lord is... Like the vocalist said something and then I'm going to say something in return. And so that's how I kind of see doing fills, is how can I find a pocket where something like a period has been put on a lyric or a phrase? How can I just kind of like add a little bit of emphasis to the end of it? That's what filling space in doing fills and counter melodies is all about. It's just a nice little response to a statement that someone else has made. And so this is why when an electric player and you fill a space at the same time, it's actually not effective at all, because it's just two people talking over each other. Like no one actually has the floor to say what they're trying to say. And so sometimes in our world, it's like, hey, I'll do the fills in verse 1. You can get the next verse. Just so there's clear boundaries on, just so we don't play on top of each other. I'll do it here. You can do it later. And so that's really helpful. And so thinking of this stuff as call and response, you for me. I fit that fill right when the phrase is over and it's not really sitting on top. Now, that's not to say that you can't have fills every once in a while that sit on top of a melody or with a melody, but phrasing it as sitting with the melody is really how you should think about it. It's like, how am I helping add to this melody, not how am I distracting away from the melody? And so let me just like play through a few songs and just kind of fill around the phrase. And so let's do something slower, like so there's not as much room in that one, but at the end of that first kind of phrase, it's like there's a big hole where someone can respond to what's being said. Sometimes it's cool not to do anything. Like you don't have to fill. I think a lot of younger players or less advanced players, it's like, all right, here's a hole, we got to fill it, you know, but that's not always the case. It's like, that's cool. Like that's a statement. It's like, hey, I'm not going to respond to that. Like I'm going to let that sit. That's a way to just think of that. And so my gut tells me that a lot of people can fill well or understand the concept of, yeah, I shouldn't play a fill when someone's singing, or I shouldn't play a fill when the electric player's filling also. But what I would challenge people to do, my gut tells me people don't think of this as this way, is thinking of it as a call and response, like a response to something that has been said. If darkness now is in it, the kingdom even a quicker song, so like those little rhythmic components are just a way of responding to the phrase, I'm finding out that you already own. And then the built-in, line there is really a call and response. The perfect sun. Whatever it is. So just little sprinkles of just the melody says something and then I respond. I will make room for you to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to. I will make room for you. So I pour my hand, praise you again and again. And I just wanna be where you are. I might be singing that melody wrong, but yeah, those are just some examples of, call and responses, and I'm just finding moments to just respond to something that's being said. And then inside of that, like just, voice leading, like make melodies that sound good. And so I've talked about before with people of taking melodies of other songs and applying them to other songs, but using those melodies as fills. And so let's do but let's play What a Beautiful Name. So So just taking a melody, like fills that you do are melodies, and so you can take a melody from a song and use it somewhere else. So obviously you would do that in time, but finding melodies that you like, and it's like, okay, how can I add that to the song I'm playing? All right, so the other thing I want to talk about is playing rhythmically. And so this is something that I think a lot of newer players have a hard time doing because they don't have the facility to do it. But also more experienced guys also have a hard time doing this because they have too much facility. And so I'll take the song like Take You at Your Word and just show you how I play it. So I take you at your So that's a fun way to play that song that gets outside of the Take You at Your Word. And that song is in 12/8, and so that song kind of trips people up of understanding, what they would call a clave or whatever. But you can find ways to rhythmically play songs that are fun, that aren't distracting. Now, I heard someone play it that song this way last week, and I would say this is wrong. I take you at your... That's like getting into swing world a little bit, and so thinking about the underlying beat of songs. And so let's take let's go back to Christ be magnified. So Christ be magnified. So I'm grabbing that melody. Oh, Christ be magnified. So the way I'm thinking about choosing what beat I play with my right hand is really just thinking about the snare drum. So that feels a lot different than oh, to Christ be magnified in the altar of my just leaving that one note or that one beat out really adds emphasis to kind of the backbeat or the driving groove. Different song, but because you could play that song, or so I know that, playing rhythmically, you're going to maybe have some just physical constraints or technical constraints, what you can and can't do. But think of ways that you can spice stuff up, like playing something with a kick drum. So. Finding a kick pattern that you can like line up your left hand with can be cool. Sometimes I do that with my right hand. It's like. Another thing you can do to play rhythmically is just finding cool little riffs that you can add into the middle of a song. So. So doing little riffs in the middle of the piano can be cool. You don't want to overdo them. You want to do them sparsely, but they can be a way to kind of, electric players do this all the time. Like, they do a little staccato thing and it sounds cool. You can do that too. Just make sure you make good note choices and don't overplay it. So the next thing I want to talk about is ghost notes. So I call this ghost note syndrome or ghost note phenomenon or whatever you want to call it. But there's something, for whatever reason, a lot of people, and not for whatever reason, I get this because I came from a very busy world, but sometimes we have the hardest time just sitting on the note we've played and not doing anything else. And so when I think of like, what I sometimes see people do, not sometimes, I see this a lot of like they just can't sit still, and so they just kind of like play just little tucked in notes that just don't make any sense. So like a Or I'm trying to, it's hard to do this because it's not instinctual for me to do, but what I'm referring to is just your fingers like subconscious desire to like keep playing notes that aren't doing anything. So you can like play a chord and still want your fingers to like move and touch stuff, and it's not contributing to anything. And what I have found in my experience is people that struggle with timing, like they just can't hit downbeats on time or they can't play stuff in time, it's because they're not in full control of their fingers or their technique, because they have little things going on that they don't know that they have going on because they're not even thinking about it. And so one thing that I challenge a lot of people to do is just play through songs and literally only hit the chord changes. Don't do anything else. Like literally nothing else. Just the chord changes, and see how that works, you know. Oh God, oh God, my God, I need you. Oh God, I need you. How you know, or what a beautiful name it is. Yeah, you are no rival, you have no equal, now and forever. You, even when it's like big and it's like it's raging, just play the chords. I think that for whatever reason, sometimes that's just a lot harder to do, is to just play super simple and play nothing else. I know that's the hardest thing for me. Like I could play fast all day and play tons of notes, and that'd be fun for me. Wouldn't serve the music, but it would be fun. What's really hard for me is to sit and just not add anything. There's this, you know, my friends give me a hard time of like, they'll see me play slow songs sometimes, and they'll be like, "Oh, we can see you sweating bullets just trying to play whole notes." And it's like, yeah, because you know, I want to play more. And so if you find yourself doing that, like you just look back at yourself playing or you record yourself and you see you doing that, challenge yourself to just play whole notes. I mean, for weeks, whatever it is, you know, pick a timeline, or just in your practice session, just do one pass through of just playing the chords, just hitting the chords, no fills, no little adds, nothing, and see if that helps with your timing. You know, I think having all that little stuff that's not adding to actually what you're playing just causes your fingers to get lazy and sloppy, and then you just sound worse. And so, yeah, hopefully all that was helpful. If you have any questions for me, leave them in the comments. I know this video is about an hour long, so hopefully you did watch all the way to the end. If you did watch all the way to the end, let me know at the bottom, because that's awesome. And statistics say that there's not many of you left at this point. And so, the few of y'all, thanks for hanging. But yeah, make sure to like, sub, share, comment, all the things. Thanks for supporting the channel, and I'll see y'all later.